In the cold dust of Tunisia, early 1943, German infantry advanced with practiced confidence. They carried their trusted Karabiner 98K rifles, the same bolt-action weapon that had served the Wehrmacht faithfully since Poland. Each man knew its rhythm: aim, fire, work the bolt, repeat. But as they crested ridgelines and stormed olive groves, they heard something different. Not the deliberate crack of rifles, nor the booming chatter of an MG-42 from their own lines. Instead, it was a steady, rolling storm of gunfire, an unbroken wall of sound. The source was the American Thompson submachine gun. The first bursts shredded the silence with a violence that stunned German patrols. Dozens of .45 caliber rounds, each heavier and slower than the standard 7.92 Mauser cartridge, slammed into cover and men alike. Soldiers who had grown accustomed to exchanging measured volleys suddenly faced squads that could drench a trench line in lead in seconds. A Wehrmacht report from Tunisia noted with alarm that the enemy short weapon is capable of discharging entire magazines in the time our men chamber a single round. American squads carried Thompsons as squad-level shock weapons. By 1943, these were no longer rare. U.S. production had surged, and at platoon level, every assault force could count on several gunners. The Germans, accustomed to reserving automatic weapons for their MG teams, now found themselves confronted by ordinary riflemen wielding compact automatics. The psychological blow was immediate. An advancing German squad suddenly halted, pinned not by machine gun nests, but by small units moving quickly and firing relentlessly. By Monte Cassino, in early 1944, the Thompson had already become a symbol of American infantry tenacity. In rubble-strewn streets, where cover was scarce and distance short, German grenadiers reported, "Enemy submachine guns dominate house fighting." The close, suffocating nature of urban combat made the Thompson S-600 round-per-minute rate of fire a nightmare for anyone caught on the wrong side of its barrel. For German soldiers, these encounters marked the beginning of a sobering realization. The Americans weren't just bringing numbers. They were bringing weapons that changed the tempo of fighting itself. No longer could German infantry rely solely on precision volleys and the occasional machine gun team. The battlefield rhythm had shifted. And in those moments of shock, men wondered what other surprises American industry would bring to the front. If you're gripped by this story of battlefield innovation, make sure to like and subscribe. There's much more to uncover about how technology reshaped World War II. The Thompson was never meant to be a rare or precious weapon. It was designed to be multiplied, reproduced, and placed in the hands of ordinary soldiers by the thousands. At the start of the war, however, its price tag told another story. In 1940, each Thompson cost nearly $200 to build, a staggering figure that limited distribution. But once the United States committed fully to global war, American industry re-engineered the weapon for mass manufacture. By 1942, the price had fallen below $70, and by 1944, it reached just $45 per unit, making it affordable for mass deployment. Factories in Bridgeport, Connecticut, operated by Auto Ordnance and Savage Arms, ran day and night. Assembly lines perfected the art of stamping and welding components, replacing earlier milled parts that had slowed production. The result was astonishing. More than 1.7 million Thompsons were produced by the end of the conflict. Each one identical in quality, reliable in the field, and available in quantities the Germans could hardly imagine. For comparison, German submachine gun production, such as the MP-40, barely exceeded 1 million across the entire war, and even then, many frontline units still relied on bolt-action rifles as their primary armament. The effect was visible on the battlefield. American squads could pool several Thompsons together, giving them a devastating edge in short-range combat. Doctrine quickly adapted. While a German Gruppe depended on its MG-42 for automatic fire, a U.S. squad might enter a village with half its men carrying Thompsons, each one capable of sweeping alleys, stairwells, and trenches with suppressive fire. For German troops used to measured engagements, this saturation was overwhelming. German intelligence officers took note. Captured Thompsons were examined carefully, and reports filed in 1943 acknowledged the weapon's rugged construction and startling rate of fire. Yet they also conceded that Germany lacked the industrial flexibility to replicate such a feat. Their machine tool industries were already overstretched, producing Panthers, Tigers, and aircraft. To divert resources into cheap, mass-produced automatics on the American scale was simply impossible. The Thompson became, therefore, more than just a gun. It was a symbol of the arsenal of democracy in action. What shocked German troops most was not simply the weapon's existence, but its ubiquity. On every front, from Tunisia to Normandy, they discovered that the Americans seemed able to arm every soldier who needed one. For the Wehrmacht, locked in a grinding war of attrition, that level of abundance was as terrifying as the .45 caliber bullets themselves. The first time German infantry came under concentrated Thompson fire, the reaction was disbelief. In Tunisia, 1943, patrols reported being stopped cold by walls of fire that seemed to erupt from American squads. A Kar 98K rifleman, trained to expect deliberate exchanges of single shots, suddenly found himself pinned by an enemy who could unleash 30 rounds in just a few seconds. Veterans of Russia, who had endured Soviet submachine gunners with PPSH-41s, admitted that the American weapon carried an even more brutal punch. The heavy .45 ACP rounds crashed into masonry, vehicles, and cover with stunning force. At Monte Cassino in January 1944, German paratroopers dug into the ruins of the abbey faced a new nightmare. As American infantry advanced through bomb-shattered stone, Thompsons roared in confined corridors where echoes amplified their ferocity. One German account recalled, "Every stairwell became a death trap. The enemy poured bullets as if from a hose. There was no pause to return fire." Bolt-action rifles, efficient at range, offered little help when enemies could close the distance and drench a hallway in seconds. The beaches of Normandy revealed another dimension. In the chaos of June 6th, as German defenders tried to repel the landings, they confronted not just sheer numbers of attackers, but the volume of firepower each small group carried ashore. Company-level pools of Thompsons meant that entire waves of GIs could advance under a rolling shield of automatic fire. For defenders used to cutting down lines of troops with carefully aimed rifle fire, this flood of bullets was staggering. Bunkers that might have held against slower-firing enemies were quickly overrun as American squads stormed positions, Thompsons blazing at point-blank range. At Anzio, February 1944, the shock deepened. German counterattacks often pushed close to the beachhead, expecting to exploit their rifles' accuracy and machine guns' suppressive power. Instead, they met infantry squads who could deliver a torrent of fire without waiting for heavy weapons to set up. Veterans described the feeling of being drowned in sound. Each burst of automatic fire smothered attempts at coordination. It was not only deadly, it was disorienting. The psychological toll was undeniable. Soldiers who had once trusted their training and superior discipline found themselves hesitating, ducking, and retreating when confronted by units whose fire never seemed to stop. The Thompson changed not only the exchange of bullets, but the very confidence with which German troops engaged the enemy. The Wehrmacht was not slow to recognize the danger posed by American Thompsons. By mid-1943, after repeated clashes in North Africa, German officers circulated directives warning that Allied squads carried a high concentration of rapid-firing small arms. Yet adapting to this new reality proved far more difficult than issuing orders. Germany's reliance on the bolt-action Kar 98K meant the bulk of its infantry remained equipped with a weapon ill-suited for close combat. The most immediate countermeasure was tactical. German units were instructed to extend engagement ranges whenever possible, using open fields and long sight lines to neutralize the Thompson's advantage. Snipers were given priority roles against American squad leaders and automatic gunners in hopes of silencing the submachine gun before it could dominate at short range. In practice, however, terrain often favored the opposite. Villages, forests, and rubble-strewn towns compressed battles into the exact conditions where Thompsons excelled. Another response was increased reliance on the MP-40. This 9mm submachine gun was lighter and more compact than the Thompson, but production was limited, and only a fraction of infantry squads could be equipped with them. Moreover, its 9mm rounds lacked the blunt stopping power of the .45 ACP, and its slower rate of fire made it less intimidating in close-quarters fights. A captured German report from Italy in 1944 even conceded that enemy heavy-caliber submachine guns overwhelm our machine pistols in shock effect. By late 1943, designers rushed to field new weapons like the STG-44 assault rifle, a groundbreaking design that finally gave German soldiers automatic firepower with greater range. Yet the weapon was introduced too late and in too few numbers to shift the balance. When SMG-44s appeared in Normandy and on the Eastern Front, American and British units already carried Thompsons and later M3 grease guns in such abundance that local parity could not be achieved. Beyond weapons, German commanders attempted psychological countermeasures. Training drills emphasized discipline under fire, teaching troops not to panic when assaulted by bursts of automatic fire. Still, first-hand reports suggest these measures were only partly successful. The visceral shock of the Thompson, the sound, the volume, the relentless spray, was not easily ignored. In truth, the greatest German countermeasure was armor. Machine guns mounted on half-tracks and tanks provided suppression against American infantry, but this only worked when vehicles were present. In countless small engagements across Italy and France, German riflemen were left to face squads bristling with Thompsons, a contest in which their doctrine and weapons left them at a disadvantage. If the Thompsons' battlefield success shocked German troops, its sheer availability astounded their commanders. The submachine gun was never meant to be a rare, elite weapon. From the moment America mobilized for total war, the Thompson became a test case in what U.S. industry could achieve when speed, cost, and volume mattered more than elegance. By 1944, the United States had produced over 1.7 million Thompsons, a figure that dwarfed German output of the MP40 and other automatics. The transformation came through ruthless industrial streamlining. Early Thompsons, like the M1928, had been finely machined, featuring drum magazines and intricate parts suited for police or gangster use in the 1930s. Wartime production stripped away every unnecessary detail. Gone were the drums, replaced by simple 20 and 30-round box magazines. Simplified bolt assemblies and stamped components replaced expensive machining. These decisions slashed costs from $200 per gun to just $45. Factories in Bridgeport, Connecticut, operated by Auto Ordnance and Savage Arms, ran around the clock, pushing out tens of thousands of units each month. For the Germans, struggling under Allied bombing campaigns and material shortages, this scale was unimaginable. Their weapons factories were tied up, producing tanks, artillery, and aircraft. The idea of allocating resources to mass-produce cheap submachine guns in the American style conflicted with German doctrine, which still placed enormous emphasis on heavy weapons and precision engineering. By 1943, German planners recognized that they could never match U.S. numbers. Their response was to double down on quality weapons like the MG42 and STG-44, but these could not be fielded in the same abundance as the Thompson. On the front lines, this industrial imbalance translated into lived experience. American companies issued Thompsons not only to frontline riflemen, but also to engineers, paratroopers, vehicle crews, and officers. In some units, nearly half the squad might carry automatic firepower. German soldiers, by contrast, often entered combat with just one MP40 per section, the rest armed with bolt-action rifles. The difference was not simply technological. It was systemic. American soldiers fought with confidence, knowing their arsenal could saturate close-quarters battlefields, while German squads were forced to conserve ammunition and rely on fire discipline. The Thompson thus became more than a weapon. It was a symbol of America's industrial muscle. Each gun represented the convergence of assembly line efficiency, raw material abundance, and a doctrine that emphasized equipping every soldier with overwhelming firepower. For German troops, realizing that their enemy could arm entire armies with these weapons was as demoralizing as facing the guns themselves. Cities and trenches became the true proving grounds for the Thompson, where its strength stood in stark contrast to the weapons of its German opponents. In the rubble-strewn streets of Cassino, the maze-like alleys of Anzio, and later the hedgerows and villages of Normandy, the submachine gun earned its reputation as the ultimate tool of close combat. Unlike the long-barreled M1 Garand or Springfield, the Thompson was compact, quick to shoulder, and devastating in the confines of a room or a narrow trench line. German defenders, often stationed with their reliable but slow Kar 98K rifles, found themselves at a fatal disadvantage. Clearing a building with a bolt-action rifle required patience, careful aim, and time that combat rarely allowed. The Thompsons stripped away that luxury. A burst of 45 ACP fire could clear a stairwell in seconds or suppress an entire room long enough for American squads to storm inside. The psychological effect was immediate. Accounts described German grenadiers calling the American weapon a bullet hose, a terrifying instrument that seemed unstoppable when echoing through stone walls and tight corridors. At Monte Cassino, the Abbey ruins became a nightmare of close-quarter ambushes. U.S. infantry armed with Thompsons could push into collapsed hallways and shattered chambers, firing at angles impossible for German riflemen to match. One Wehrmacht veteran recalled that his squad dreaded nighttime patrols because the Americans carried automatics that could spray without hesitation, while the Germans had to conserve ammunition and rely on single shots. It wasn't just lethality, it was tempo. The Thompson dictated the pace of combat, forcing German troops into reactive positions rather than offensive ones. In Normandy, hedgerow fighting offered a similar stage. When American squads advanced through tight lanes bordered by thick earth banks, visibility dropped to mere feet. Here, the Thompson reigned supreme. Fire teams equipped with multiple submachine guns could launch sudden flanking assaults, saturating German strongpoints before defenders could regroup. German soldiers often reported feeling overrun by noise and fire when facing these tactics, their rifles too slow and their limited automatic weapons too few. The Thompson's role in urban warfare was not about elegance, but about raw dominance. It was the weapon that turned chaotic, fragmented battlegrounds into arenas where American squads had the edge. To German defenders, it symbolized unpredictability. Any doorway, alley, or corner could erupt with a torrent of American bullets. And in the brutal chess game of city fighting, that unpredictability proved decisive. For German infantrymen, the Thompson was more than just another American weapon. It was a symbol of imbalance, a reminder that their opponents fought under entirely different conditions. The sound alone carried weight. German veterans later described the staccato bursts of 45 ACP fire as a metallic thunder that seemed unrelenting compared to the deliberate crack of a bolt-action rifle. In the fog of battle, hearing a Thompson in the distance meant the Americans were not just advancing, they were charging with confidence. The psychological shock came from contrast. Most German riflemen carried the Kar 98K, a weapon accurate and deadly, but fundamentally limited. Each shot demanded bolt cycling, careful aim, and ammunition conservation. Facing American squads where 2 or 3 men could lay down hundreds of rounds per minute shattered that balance. To a soldier crouched behind a wall, the Thompson created the impression of being hopelessly outgunned, even if actual numbers of casualties were lower than perceived. The very feeling of endless firepower eroded confidence long before bullets struck. Prisoner interrogations confirmed this reaction. Wehrmacht soldiers frequently expressed astonishment at the sheer abundance of automatic weapons in American units, remarking that Americans seemed to waste ammunition as if it grew on trees. To the Germans, trained in thrift and precision, this abundance was unnerving. It suggested not only industrial superiority, but also a tactical mindset unconcerned with shortages. Every burst of Thompson fire reinforced the notion that the Allies had resources and firepower beyond Germany's reach. In urban or trench engagements, morale dipped sharply. German troops often hesitated to counterattack positions defended by Thompsons, knowing the cost would be high in close quarters. One veteran later admitted that his unit avoided entering buildings cleared by American infantry, fearing hidden submachine guns waiting to unleash devastating bursts at close range. Even when armed with the MP-40, a comparable submachine gun, the Germans knew that far fewer of their comrades carried them. The imbalance bred resignation, as though each skirmish was a fight against odds stacked before the battle even began. Ultimately, the Thompsons' psychological impact was twofold. On the battlefield, it magnified American aggression, allowing infantry to appear bolder, louder, and more dominant than their actual numbers suggested. Off the battlefield, it chipped away at German confidence, reinforcing the belief that the United States wielded not just superior weapons, but an inexhaustible arsenal. For soldiers caught in its path, the Thompson became a sound, a fear, and a symbol of an industrial giant that could not be matched. If the Thompson earned its battlefield reputation through firepower, its true strength lay in the machinery behind it, America's vast industrial base. Unlike Germany, which struggled to balance tank, aircraft, and small arms production, the United States poured resources into scaling weapon output on an unprecedented level. By 1944, nearly 1.7 million Thompsons had rolled off production lines, a feat that highlighted both the adaptability of American industry and its raw capacity. When the weapon was first developed in the 1920s, the Thompson was an expensive, almost exotic firearm. Early units cost around $200 apiece, a price tag that made widespread issue impossible. But by 1942, wartime necessity forced simplification. Components were streamlined, wooden fittings replaced fancy details, and the weapons cost fell to around $45 per unit. Factories once dedicated to cars and machinery retooled for arms, with companies like Auto Ordnance and Savage Arms pushing out tens of thousands of submachine guns each month. This industrial revolution contrasted sharply with Germany's situation. The Wehrmacht fielded capable automatic weapons like the MP-40, but fewer than 1.1 million were produced during the entire war. Many German soldiers never saw one, relying instead on the Kar 98K rifle. American infantry units, by contrast, routinely pooled Thompsons at the company level, ensuring that every squad had access to multiple automatic weapons. This distribution wasn't just numerical superiority, it was structural. The U.S. Army's doctrine of firepower rested on the assumption that production would always meet demand, and the factories proved that assumption correct. Germany's economy, strangled by Allied bombing and resource shortages, simply could not keep pace. Where American factories ran 3 shifts with abundant raw materials, German production lines often slowed due to fuel, steel, and labor shortages. By 1944, even as German engineers developed advanced prototypes like the STG-44, mass deployment was impossible. The Thompson, though older in design, retained its battlefield dominance because it could be produced and shipped in overwhelming numbers. Every crate of Thompsons that crossed the Atlantic represented more than just weapons. It was proof of America, the arsenal of democracy, in motion. For German soldiers, the experience of facing squads where automatic weapons seemed endless was not an illusion. Behind those bursts of fire stood the factories of Detroit, Chicago, and Bridgeport, working tirelessly to equip an army that never lacked arms or ammunition. The Thompson's industrial story wasn't about innovation alone. It was about scale, efficiency, and the relentless capacity to outproduce the Axis at every turn. The Thompson was not merely another weapon in a soldier's kit. It reshaped how American units thought about fighting. Before its widespread distribution, infantry doctrine emphasized deliberate rifle fire, bayonet charges, and squad maneuvers built around slow, methodical advances. With the Thompson, the U.S. Army embraced a far more aggressive approach to close-quarters combat, one that emphasized shock, speed, and overwhelming firepower. In villages across Italy, for instance, American squads armed with Thompsons pioneered fire and flood tactics. Riflemen pinned defenders from a distance while Thompson gunners swept alleys and courtyards with bursts of .45 caliber fire. Buildings that would have cost dozens of lives to clear with bolt-action rifles could be stormed quickly and decisively. Veterans of the 34th Infantry Division recalled how Thompsons transformed the dreaded house-to-house fighting in places like Monte Cassino. German defenders, expecting careful American advances, were stunned by sudden rushes of submachine gun fire at close range. The Thompson also changed squad composition. Where German infantry formations revolved around the machine gun as their core, American units often treated the Thompson as the centerpiece of small-scale assaults. Sergeants frequently carried one, ensuring that the squad leader himself could provide both leadership and devastating firepower in a push. During the Normandy campaign, paratroopers of the 101st Airborne used their Thompsons not only to clear trenches, but also to disrupt German counterattacks before they gained momentum. Their tactics depended on striking first, with violence and volume of fire, exploiting the Thompson's ability to saturate a target area. Mobility was another critical factor. Unlike heavier crew-served weapons, the Thompson could move with the soldier. This flexibility encouraged aggressive patrolling, night raids, and ambushes that relied on surprise. Units in the hedgerows of France used Thompsons to devastating effect, crawling into range before unleashing sudden barrages that left German squads scattered and disoriented. The weapon's compact design allowed soldiers to maneuver in places where rifles were cumbersome, turning barns, ruins, and narrow lanes into killing grounds where speed dictated survival. By the time American forces reached Germany in 1945, these adaptations were deeply ingrained. The Thompson was no longer just a weapon of opportunity. It was part of doctrine. Commanders recognized its value not only as a tool of destruction, but as an instrument of morale, giving soldiers confidence in their ability to dominate at close quarters. Against German troops still bound to older infantry methods, the Thompson ensured that American squads dictated the terms of every close-range fight. When the smoke of World War II cleared, the Thompson's influence stretched far beyond the ruins of Europe. It was more than just a weapon carried by American GIs. It had become an emblem of how industrial might, tactical adaptation, and psychological dominance could turn the tide of modern war. German soldiers remembered its distinctive roar. Veterans spoke of its reliability in the chaos of combat. And military historians recognized it as a tool that bridged old doctrines of rifle fire with the emerging age of automatic infantry arms. Its post-war legacy appeared almost immediately. In occupied Germany, disarmed Wehrmacht veterans often reflected with disbelief at the sheer abundance of Thompsons in Allied hands, contrasting it with their own scarcity of automatic weapons. American officers, analyzing battlefield reports, saw in the Thompson the proof that firepower distribution mattered as much as individual skill. The principle that squads armed with rapid-fire weapons could dominate those reliant on slower rifles became foundational to the next generation of infantry doctrine worldwide. Even in the early Cold War, the Thompson remained in circulation. From Korea to Indochina, Allied and proxy forces carried the same 45 caliber submachine gun that had stormed through Normandy and Anzio. For American troops, it symbolized continuity. For enemies, it echoed the same dread once felt by German soldiers in the trenches of Italy and the bocage of France. Though newer designs like the M3 grease gun and eventually the M16 would replace it, the Thompson's battlefield legend endured. Culturally, it left an equally powerful mark. Photographs of American infantry advancing with Thompsons became iconic representations of the arsenal of democracy. To this day, reenactments, films, and museums preserve its image as the quintessential American weapon of World War II. German accounts, once filled with astonishment at facing walls of 45 caliber fire, continue to be cited as evidence that psychological shock can be as decisive as armor or artillery. Ultimately, the Thompson's legacy is twofold. Technically, it shaped the global recognition that automatic weapons must form the backbone of infantry forces. Symbolically, it embodied the power of mass production, showing how an industrial nation could not only arm its soldiers, but overwhelm its enemies with confidence, firepower, and abundance. For the German soldiers who first heard its burst echo through the smoke, the Thompson was unforgettable. For history, it remains the sound of America's industrial and tactical superiority securing victory in the world as greatest conflict.